I had hunted monsters before, but this one was different. This one wasn't hiding, it was waiting. The heat clung to me, thick and unmoving. My shirt stuck to my back, my breathing shallow as I stepped over a tangle of roots. The cicadas droned, a wall of noise pressing in from all sides. I scanned the forest ahead, nothing but trees, their trunks stretching like black veins against the night sky. Then the sound cut off, not faded, not quieted, stopped. I froze. The air, once humming with life, was dead. Even the wind had gone still. I tightened my grip on my rifle. Silence didn't just happen out here. It meant something was close, something that didn't belong. The first thing I saw was the lantern. Its weak flame flickered inside the glass, the only sign of life in the empty campsite. Tents stood where they had been pitched. Gear lay undisturbed, a backpack half-zipped, a cooler with its lid cracked open. But no movement, no people, no signs of a struggle. Then I saw the blood. It soaked the dirt, pooling beneath the tents, dark and thick. Not splattered, not streaked, pooled, as if someone had stood there and poured out every drop inside them. The air stank of copper, thick enough that I could taste it. I crouched, pressing 2 fingers to the ground. The blood was still wet. I exhaled slow and steady, adjusting my stance. My foot nudged something, and I glanced down. A camera, cracked but still flickering with life. The screen glowed faintly in the dark. I picked it up, brushed off the dirt, and pressed play. A green haze filled the display, night vision. The lens wobbled, shaking in unsteady hands. Somewhere in the footage, a man whispered, his breath ragged. "It's not Bigfoot. It's not Bigfoot. It's not." The whispering stopped. The camera swung wildly, catching glimpses of trees, a tent, someone's shoulder. Then, between 2 trunks, movement, not fast, not sudden, a shape detached from the darkness. It had been standing there the whole time, watching. 2 eyes, round and too reflective, stared back through the trees. A slow, steady inhale crackled through the speakers. Not a growl, not a snarl. Breathing, deep, measured, like something was tasting the air. The footage blurred. The camera jolted. A gasp. Then, impact. The camera hit the ground, catching a single frame, something moving too fast for its size. Static. I stood, setting the camera down with careful hands. My pulse thudded in my ears. A crack echoed through the trees. I pivoted, rifle raised, my breath caught in my chest. The trees twisted together, shadows bleeding into one another, the underbrush thick with something unseen. A shape shifted between the trunks. It was watching. I wasn't alone. The screaming had stopped, but something else had started listening. The rifle felt solid in my hands, the weight of it familiar. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink, just listened. The forest stretched in every direction, endless trunks stacked like prison bars. Nothing moved, no wind, no birds, not even the buzz of a mosquito. But the pressure in the air was thick, like standing too close to a lightning strike. A snap, not distant. Close, too close. I turned toward the sound, slow and steady, the rifle following my line of sight. A cluster of brush swayed slightly. Something had passed through, not running, not rushing, gliding. My thumb flicked the safety off. I took a step forward. Then another. A smell hit me. Something sour, damp, like an animal den mixed with copper. I stopped short. A dark shape lay crumpled between the trees ahead. Not a person, not all of a person. The torso was intact, arms still attached, but the rest emptied. The skin looked stretched, dried, like it had been left in the sun for days. But that wasn't possible. This happened recently. The cut along the stomach was too precise, the edges too smooth, like something had peeled it open, drained it. My jaw clenched. No claw marks, no teeth marks, no tearing, just emptiness. Another step. The body had been propped against a tree, its head tipped upward, mouth still open like it had died screaming, except there was no sound. No one had heard this. I swallowed, scanning the ground. No footprints, no drag marks. I wasn't tracking something. It was tracking me, a breath, not my own, behind me. I spun, rifle snapping up. Nothing. The trees stared back, black and indifferent. The rifle's barrel tracked left, right. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to get out of here, to not turn my back. But that wasn't my job. My job was to kill whatever left this mess behind. I moved forward, forcing myself to keep my steps light, controlled. The blood trail, what little of it existed, vanished fast. But the feeling of being watched didn't. 50 yards ahead, the brush thinned. A ridge rose, broken rocks spilling into a dry creek bed. A good vantage point. I climbed, boots scraping against loose stones. The rifle stayed tight against my shoulder as I reached the top. Then I saw it. The bones came first, scattered, cracked open, piled in small, neat stacks. Some human, some animal, some too small to tell. And then the pit, the hole in the earth, stretched unnaturally deep. The dirt around it sank inward, disturbed, like something had been crawling in and out. A sick feeling settled low in my gut. This wasn't just a den, it was a feeding ground. I crouched, careful not to disturb the earth. The blood near the edge was fresh. Someone had been here. Recently, I scanned the trees, and the trees scanned back. 2 glowing pinpricks blinked open in the dark. Not an animal, not something feral. Something aware, something that knew it had been found. My hand stayed steady as I raised the rifle, and then, for the first time all night, it moved. Not a lunge, not a charge, a step, deliberate, measured. My pulse hammered against my ribs. It wasn't running. It wasn't afraid. Another step. It was walking straight toward me. The thing stepped forward, slow and measured, as if it had all the time in the world. It wasn't a charge. It wasn't a bluff. It was confidence. I kept the rifle steady, finger resting against the trigger, waiting for something, anything, that would tell me this was just another job, just another creature, something I could put down and forget about. But the way it moved, the way it watched, I had seen a lot of things. I had killed a lot of things. Nothing moved like this. The firelight from my lantern barely reached its body, but it was enough. Enough to see the thick fur clinging to its frame like old, wet cloth. Enough to see the long fingers twitching at its sides, not from instinct, but anticipation. Then it smiled, a slow, deliberate pull of lips over jagged, too white teeth. A chill shot down my spine. I pulled the trigger. The gunshot exploded through the forest. The recoil kicked into my shoulder. The lantern's glow caught the spray of dark liquid. Too dark, almost black. I adjusted my aim, ready to fire again. It didn't fall. It didn't even flinch. The bullet wound was there, a hole torn clean through muscle, but nothing poured from it. The darkness in its chest seeped slow, too slow, like the wound was deciding whether it should even exist. Then the thing lifted its head and met my eyes, and laughed, not a deep, guttural sound, not an animal snarl, something soft, breathless, almost amused. A deep, horrible instinct screamed through me. I had made a mistake. The thing took a step forward. I pulled the trigger again. Nothing. A sharp metallic click. Jam. I had seconds. I threw myself back down the ridge, my boots skidding on the loose rock. The thing didn't chase. It didn't have to. It was still smiling. The forest blurred around me as I ran, lungs burning, legs straining to move faster than I ever had before. No sound behind me, no pursuit, just the feeling of something watching. I needed cover, a place to regroup. The ranger station. I knew it was close, tucked deeper in the trees, long abandoned but still standing. I veered hard left, my boots pounding against the forest floor, weaving through gnarled roots and half-rotted logs. The trees loomed higher, thicker, the moonlight barely slipping through the canopy. There, a break in the tree line. The station sat just ahead, a squat wooden structure, its windows dark. The door hung slightly ajar, warped from time and weather. I didn't slow, didn't hesitate. I threw my shoulder into the door and stumbled inside. The air was thick with dust, stale with rot. I kicked the door shut behind me, pressed my back against it, and waited. Silence. Then, a single deliberate knock. I stopped breathing. Another knock, slow, steady, the same rhythm as my heartbeat. Then a voice, not mine, not human, low, amused, mimicking. let me in. The wood around me groaned, and then the voice whispered again. You can't run forever. The walls creaked, the wood bending under something heavy, something that shouldn't be standing upright. I held my breath, gripping the rifle tight against my chest. The thing outside stayed silent now, but I could feel it, leaning against the door, its weight pressing into the rotting wood. Then it breathed, slow, deliberate, the kind of inhale meant to pull in a scent. My scent. I moved away from the door, careful to keep my steps light. The station was small. One room, dust-covered cabinets, an old radio that wouldn't work even if I begged it to. A window sat to my left, the cracked glass barely holding together. I peered through it, my pulse hammering in my ears. The forest was empty. No movement, no sign of life. Nothing, except for the shadow stretching across the dirt. I swallowed hard. The lantern outside still flickered, casting just enough light to show the long, warped silhouette. Something too tall, too thin, too stretched. The head was tilted at an unnatural angle, almost curious. I gritted my teeth and pressed my back to the far wall, forcing a slow breath through my nose. I needed to think, needed a plan. The rifle was useless. Whatever this thing was, bullets weren't doing a damn thing. Fire. It had bled, but the wound didn't react like it should have. That meant it was healing. Too fast. But nothing heals from fire. I scanned the room. Old cabinets, wooden furniture, shelves lined with decayed books. Fuel. A rusted metal locker stood in the corner, half collapsed from rot. I pried it open, my fingers moving fast. My breath hitched when I felt the cool, familiar shape of a metal canister. Gasoline. A loud creak snapped my head toward the door. The wood was bowing inward, bending, splintering under pressure. It wasn't trying to break it down. It was peeling it open. A long, gnarled hand slid through the widening gap, fingers twitching. They weren't claws. They were hands, too human, too wrong. I grabbed the gas can, gripping it tight. My hand shook, but I forced myself to move. I wouldn't get another chance. The door groaned again, the gap stretching wider. Then the whisper, "You can't hide." The breath behind it was warm, wet, like it was already inside. No more waiting. I spun the cap loose and threw the gas across the walls, the floor, the door, anywhere the fire could catch. The smell filled my lungs, sharp and choking. A single match. I struck it against the wall. The tiny flame flared to life, flickering in my shaking fingers. The door snapped in half. A shape lunged through the gap, tall, dark, moving too fast. I threw the match. The room erupted in flames. Heat blasted across my skin, fire spreading up the walls, catching on old wood and paper, devouring everything in seconds. The thing reeled back, its body twisting as the flames licked at its fur. It didn't scream, but for the first time, it stepped away. Not an animal, not a monster, a predator, a vampire. It just watched me. The smile was gone now. The eyes, hollow and glowing, locked onto mine. And then it stepped back. Not ran, not lunged, just stepped. The fire spread too fast for me to think. The heat forced me backward, my vision blurred with smoke. I turned and ran, bursting through the back door, the forest swallowing me whole. Behind me, the station burned. The flames roared, and somewhere in the smoke, it still watched. It wasn't dead, not yet, but now it was finally hunting me. The fire turned the night into a pulsing, flickering hellscape. The dry wood of the ranger station burned fast, smoke curling through the trees, thick and choking. My lungs stung, my legs ached, but I kept running because I knew it was still behind me. I could feel it, the same way you know something is watching from a darkened corner, just out of sight. The fire hadn't killed it. It had only pissed it off. I stumbled down a ridge, boots skidding on loose earth, and barely caught myself against a tree. My rifle was slung across my back now, useless. The silver rounds were my only chance, but I had exactly one left. I gritted my teeth, forcing my breath into something steady, listening. Nothing, no wind, no insects, no footsteps. Just the distant roar of the fire, its glow casting long, twisted shadows through the underbrush. Then the silence shifted. Not sound, not movement, just pressure, the weight of something big. Behind me, I turned fast, raising the rifle. The forest in front of me was empty, and then it stepped out. The light of the fire barely touched it, the glow only deepening the void of its fur. It was burned, patches of blackened flesh, smoke still curling from its arms, but it didn't slow. It didn't feel, and its face. No more amusement, no more slow curling grins, just eyes, hollow, bright, unblinking. I leveled the rifle, but I knew one shot wouldn't be enough. Fire. I needed more fire. My mind raced, scanning my surroundings. Trees, thick with brush, the ground dry from weeks without rain. I needed a way to trap it. Then my eyes landed on the ridge. The trees grew too close together. If I could funnel it toward me, I could get it into the choke point, force it into one place. The thing tilted its head, sensing the shift in me. I moved. Ducking low, I ran, keeping my steps careful, leading it toward the ridge. I could hear it following, not rushing, not desperate. It knew I was running out of time. The trees thickened around me. The ridge ahead dipped down into a narrow funnel of rocks and fallen branches. Almost there, I leapt down into the space, spun fast, and raised the rifle. It was already there, my breath locked in my throat. It was faster than before. The burns had slowed it, but now it was done waiting. I fired. The silver round slammed into its chest. This time, it staggered. A sound ripped from its throat, something deep, gurgling, not a scream. not pain, surprise. I grabbed the last flare from my belt, striking it against my forearm. The red flame burst to life, casting an eerie glow over its blackened skin. Its eyes locked onto mine. Recognition. I threw the flare. The ridge exploded in fire. The dry brush caught fast, flames racing up the trees. The thing lurched back, fur igniting, flames crawling up its arms, its chest, its face. It didn't scream. It just stood there, watching me. I backed away, breath ragged, the fire roaring between us now. The smoke stung my eyes, blurred my vision, but I didn't look away. It still wasn't dead. Not yet, but it wasn't moving anymore. The flames crawled higher, wrapping around its body, turning it into something else, a shape, a shadow, and then nothing. The fire swallowed it whole, and then the forest was empty. Dawn broke through the trees, washing the world in pale gold. I sat on the edge of the burned ridge, the rifle across my lap, breathing in the smoke-stained air. It was over, but the silence felt wrong. Not the quiet of peace, the quiet of something unfinished. I pushed myself up, stiff, sore, exhausted. The job was done. I had seen it die. There was nothing left to hunt. And yet, as I turned back toward my truck, a feeling crawled up my spine. The weight of something unseen. I glanced back. The trees stood still, blackened from fire, smoke curling between the trunks. And there, just at the very edge of the tree line, something small, not moving, not hiding, just watching. It wasn't as big, it wasn't burned, but its eyes were the same. I gripped the rifle, my pulse hammering against my ribs. The thing in the trees tilted its head. Then, slowly, it stepped back into the shadows, gone, but not gone forever.